Hey, Ram fans, welcome back. What is going on? Mark from Rams Up here. The last couple of episodes, I've been dissecting the Rams schedule. Part one, I looked at all of their AFC opponents, and part two, I looked at their NFC South opponents. My plan was to move on to those two first place teams they play in the NFC, the Detroit Lions and the Philadelphia Eagles. But a few things happening that compelled me to shift gears here a little bit and get back to my position group analysis. Yes, it's tied to this Brock Purdy contract. I am going to look at the NFC West quarterbacks and their backups and see how these teams stack up against each other. I thought it'd be a good time for that. And I already did that with the tight ends and the running backs. Today, we will look at the quarterbacks. Now, it is episode 740 on the podcast, and I'm going to talk about a player who wore number 40. And I got some, I guess I'd call it criticism on the YouTube channel. Someone complaining they don't care about these old time Rams, not interested, which I find a little bit sad, actually. I think it's important to keep the history of some of these players alive. The Rams have an incredible history, and I love talking about some of these old timers. I think it was episode 540 or 640. I talked about another number 40, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, who might be too ancient for some of you, but I'm going to continue to do that. This episode, though, I am talking about someone a little more current that a lot of you can probably relate to, and that is number 40 outside linebacker Von Miller. Now, the Rams looked like they were well positioned for a playoff run, potentially a Super Bowl run in 2021, and Les Snead pulled the trigger, made the trade, a second and third rounder for Von Miller. Von had, at this point, he has 129 and a half sacks in his career. He ended up with 5 more sacks for the Rams during that regular season, but in the Super Bowl, another 2 sacks, which means he is tied with Charles Haley with the most sacks career-wise in the Super Bowl, the only player with multiple sack totals in 2 different Super Bowls. This was a really key move that Les Snead made, helped us secure a Super Bowl championship, and Von Miller, definitely a big part of that. Our number 40, Von Miller for the Los Angeles Rams. Now, let's move on to these position groups, shall we? And before we do that, I'm going to run through the 2022 draft for each of the NFC West teams because 2 players on the 49ers, from the 49ers 2022 draft, we had news on them recently. Their first overall pick, in the second round, the 61st pick overall, defensive lineman Drake Jackson, they finally moved on from him. He's out of Corona High School in USC. And when they drafted him, I was kind of had an aw shucks attitude. Thought he was going to be a great player, but he just battled through too many injuries, constantly on the mend. And the 49ers finally decided to move on from him last week. And as far as I know, he's a free agent. And then their 7th pick, their last pick in the 7th round, I should say, Mr. Irrelevant quarterback Brock Purdy getting the big contract. What about all the guys in between? Well, they've already moved on from their first pick in that draft. What about everybody else? In the 3rd round, running back Tyrion Davis-Price, no longer with the team. Also in the 3rd round, wide receiver Danny Gray, no longer with the team. In the 5th round, cornerback Samuel Womack, no longer with the team. And then they have 2 guys that are in backup roles, both in the 6th round, offensive lineman Nick Zakelj and defensive tackle Kalia Davis. And then, of course, Purdy. So, if it weren't for Purdy, this might have gone down as one of the worst draft hauls that I've ever seen. It was pretty much a disaster. They did hit the jackpot with Purdy. So does that make 49er fans feel a little bit better about this draft? I suppose. But man, this does not paint a pretty picture about the 49ers' ability to evaluate talent. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan struck out a bunch of times here. Now Drake Jackson, it's mostly due to the injury, so you can't bang on them too much about that. But man, really poor draft. Now, conversely, if we look at the Seahawks 2022 draft, boy, did they nail it. In the first round, offensive tackle Charles Cross, starter. In the second round, linebacker Boye Mafe. He's racking up some good numbers sack-wise. Also in the second round, running back Kenneth Walker III, solid running back. In the third round, starting offensive tackle Abraham Lucas. And then in the fourth and fifth rounds, back-to-back, two productive cornerbacks, Kobe Bryant and Tariq Woolen. And then after that, defensive end Tyreek Smith, wide receiver Bo Melton, and wide receiver Derek Young. Overall, man, a pretty solid draft, some really productive players. I don't know if you're going to find any stars here, any perennial Pro Bowlers, but guys that contribute to the very productive guys across this roster. Two starting offensive linemen, a pretty darn good running back, two good defensive backs. So the Seahawks, really good job here. Now, the Cardinals 2022 draft, similar to the 49ers. In the second round, 55th pick overall, tight end Trey McBride, and he's the best tight end in this division right now. Sorry, George Kittle. So the Cardinals nailed it here. Trey McBride out of Colorado State. After that, a lot of misses. Defensive end Cameron Thomas, he was out of San Diego State. Defensive end Myjai Sanders. Running back Keontae Ingram. Guard Lasita Smith. Defensive back Christian Matthew. Linebacker Jesse Luketa. And guard Marquise Hayes. This was a pretty dreadful draft, I have to say. Without McBride, unmitigated disaster, I should say. And McBride, the one saving grace, very similar to the 49ers. Without Brock Purdy, horrible draft. And the Cardinals, well, actually, I would say even with Brock Purdy, a horrible draft. And the same thing here with the Cardinals. Now, the Rams 2022 draft, a little bit more mixed, but still overall pretty darn good, considering they did not have a first or second round pick. In the third round, they kind of blew it there with Logan Bruss. And in the fourth round, cornerback Kobe Durant, solid player. In the fifth round, Kyron Williams, are you kidding me? And in the sixth round, Quentin Lake, who did not miss a snap on defense until that somewhat meaningless Week 18 game. In the sixth round, Darion Kendrick, sixth round, I would say that was not a complete miss. He'll be coming back this year, has a chance to prove something. And then Daniel Hardy, Russ Yeast, and A.J. Curry all in the seventh round. But considering Kobe Durant, Kyron Williams, and Quentin Lake, all significant contributors to this team, Rams did okay. Remember, they did not have a first or second round pick. So, yeah, kudos to the Rams and double kudos to the Seahawks, Cardinals, and 49ers. Wow, 2022 draft classes that they probably want to forget, aside from Trey McBride and Brock Purdy, I suppose. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this new contract. Brock Purdy, 5 years, $265 million. And my first thought on this is, man, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, they better hope this 49ers roster delivers a divisional championship at a minimum and maybe a Super Bowl in the next couple of years. But they're going to have some issues, but they do have a way of handling it, much like the Rams in similar situations have fought their way out of these cap situations. So in 2026, before this Purdy contract, that's right, $265 million over 5 years, before signing Purdy, it's really an extension, right? They had $38 million in cap space in 2026. Their top 8 cap hits, and I'm going to give you what they would save on their salary cap with a post-June 1 cut next year. So Fred Warner, $26 million. If they were to move on from him, they would save $18 million. But Fred Warner is just too valuable. Barring injury, he's sticking around. Trent Williams, $13 million cap hit in 2026, a $25 million savings. And what gets me about Trent Williams, I mean, he's an incredible player, but he was talking about retiring, I think it was 2 years ago. So I'm really surprised he stuck around this long, to be honest with you. It still plays at a very high level. We'll come back to him in a second. Nick Bosa, $42 million hit. They won't save anything. This is all from over the cap. You can check these numbers. Sanity, check them for me. Why don't you do that? George Kittle just got the new contract, $27 million cap hit next year, and they're not going to save anything if they move on from him. Actually, a $10 million hit. And then Brandon Ayuk, $35 million, and the same thing. No savings, actually a hit if they move on from him. Those Kittle and Ayuk contracts don't make any sense to me. But sometimes, you get boxed into a corner as a franchise. You have these really productive, and in Kittle's case, popular players. The franchise, the fans want you to keep them around. And so you kind of just bend to the wind and extend these guys. Now, I don't think either of them are good contracts, but the out the 49ers are going to have is Trent Williams, I think. I'd really be surprised if he was on the 2026 49ers. But given that, I'm really surprised that they didn't draft any offensive, or they drafted a guard late in the draft. But other than that, they haven't really figured out who his replacement's going to be. Maybe that's for next year. Maybe they'll sign a free agent to replace Trent Williams, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I just don't see Trent Williams. I don't see the 49ers being able to keep Trent Williams beyond the 2025 season. It's a very top-heavy contract, and Brock Purdy's contract is going to make it more difficult. And remember, Brock Purdy, he is probably the foremost player on this team that would like to keep someone like Trent Williams around, but it may not work that way. A quarterback, relies on that left tackle so much. But 49ers are going to be in a little bit of a dilemma next year, but I think they have a means of figuring it out. The bottom line, the most important thing is, though, they better start winning, and they better start winning fast, and not just, 10-7. That's not going to cut it for this franchise. They need to win. They need to win big. They need to get back to, they need to bring home their first Super Bowl title in like a half a century, it seems like. And we'll see. I'm not thrilled about the prospects of, if I'm a 49ers fan, I should say I'm not thrilled about the prospects of having this guy lead my team for the next 5 years. I mean, I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that could be very productive in this offense. Brock Purdy's one of them, but is he the guy to get you over the hump? That remains to be seen. And hey, I'm a Ram homer, so take that with a grain of salt. That's how I feel about it. And that plays directly into our next conversation. We are going to talk about the various quarterback rooms across the NFC West, and we're going to talk primarily about the starters. But it's kind of important to, check in on the whole quarterback room. What if things go south? What if there's an injury? Can this franchise move forward? So the 49ers, Brock Purdy, obviously the starter, 6'1", 220, 25 years old. He has a career 67.5% completion percentage, not too shabby, 64 TDs, 27 interceptions. So he's been very efficient for sure. And their backups, Mac Jones and Curtis Rourke, the rookie. I think Mac Jones is a guy that could probably, produce pretty well in this offense. Probably a sufficient quarterback, I would say, but nothing to get too excited about. Curtis Rourke, a rookie, he'd be the the emergency plan, I guess, if something happened to both of them. But hey, Curtis Rourke was drafted higher than Brock Purdy, so we never know. Overall, you got to give them a good grade for their starter. The backups, nothing to get too excited about, but nothing to push the panic button over either. Now, the Seattle quarterbacks, they have Sam Darnold there, and we saw what he did with the Vikings, right? So he can obviously play some pretty darn good football. 6'3", 225 out of San Juan Capistrano, or is it San Clemente, or is it both? I'm not sure. He turns 28 before the season starts, out of USC, of course. He has a 61.2% completion percentage, 98 TDs, 68 interceptions. And, the thing about Sam Darnold, he's played on some poor teams. So, you can't really compare him statistically to Purdy's situation, that's for sure. But Jalen Milroe, I'd be really, really excited if I was a Seahawks fan. I think he is the eventual solution, long-term solution at quarterback. I think Sam Darnold, he'll have an opportunity to seal this job down for the next several years. But if he falters, it'll be Jalen Milroe time. And Drew Lock, he's if he's your third string quarterback, you could do a lot worse. So overall, this quarterback room right now today, it's certainly not, I wouldn't call it anything near elite as far as a starter goes, Sam Darnold, but he's proven he can play pretty good football. I don't know if he's going to be the guy to get you to the Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl. Maybe down the road, Jalen Milroe might be that guy. Overall, not a bad quarterback room, though. Then you got the Arizona quarterbacks, and Kyler Murray, just so inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get with him. He can just be so scary if you're a defense trying to contain Kyler Murray, what he can do with his legs. But he seems to falter in key situations, in my opinion. And he's been there. He's had his opportunities to prove he is the guy. He's one of these quarterbacks that's, too good to move on from, but not good enough to get you to the promised land. 5'10", 207. He turns 28 before the season starts as well. 67.1 completion percentage, not too shabby. 115 TDs, 57 interceptions, and his backup, Jacoby Brissett, whatever. If he steps in, he could probably right the ship for a couple of games, but I would not be confident about the Cardinals' prospects if something happens to Kyler Murray. And then there's Matthew Stafford, 6'3", 214 pounds, I almost said 57 years old, 37 years old, 63.4% completion percentage, 377 touchdowns, and 188 interceptions. And those stats, not really fair to compare those to someone like Brock Purdy, who's played in a great offense, surrounded with great talent, and backed up by pretty darn good defenses his whole career. Maybe not last year. Stafford languished it with the Lions for quite some time. He had some great receivers there. I get it. But overall, he's played with some pretty bad teams. So you can't ding him for those statistics. But he's won a Super Bowl. What more do we need to say about Matthew Stafford? And the thing I would say about Matthew Stafford as compared to Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray, and Sam Darnold, who you got in a playoff game? Seriously, who do you got? If everything's on the line tomorrow morning, Matthew Stafford has to be your guy among these four quarterbacks. And then you got Jimmy G as his backup, who, probably the most experienced backup in this group for sure, right? And he's played some pretty good football. And, we saw him very briefly last year. He was, chucking a lot of short underneath stuff, but he looked really good. If Matthew Stafford were to go down for a couple of games, I'd feel pretty confident with Jimmy G at the helm. And even long term, as compared to these other backups, absolutely. I think the Rams might have right now the best backup quarterback in the division. I think they had the best quarterback in the division. So after that, of course, Stetson Bennett. Didn't include him on this YouTube slide, which I probably should have. Some people think he's going to get cut, but Stetson Bennett, an unknown quantity. But Stafford and Garoppolo, man, pretty happy with that. If that's the Rams quarterback room, I think it's the best quarterback room in the division. And something else I wanted to share. So how do these guys perform in the fourth quarter in crunch time? And I looked over their data in the fourth quarter of the last two seasons, trailing by 7 points or less. How do they perform? Well, Brock Purdy, 4 TDs and 7 interceptions. Kyler Murray, 2 TDs and 5 interceptions. Sam Darnold, not bad actually. It's all last year. He barely played the previous year. 5 TDs and 1 interception. And then you got Matthew Stafford in the fourth quarter, trailing by 7 points or less, 8 TDs and 2 interceptions. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I'm talking about and why the Rams, I think, have the best quarterback in this division. And I've seen some arguments. One of the reasons I wanted to get back to this, I saw some folks arguing on X or Blue Sky, wherever it was, about who really has the best quarterback. And a lot of people making an argument for Brock Purdy. The contract came up, and that was, the topic of the day. And statistically, wise comparing these guys side by side, you might lean towards Brock Purdy, but the eye test and the fourth quarter test and the Super Bowl test, and just the chutzpah that Matthew Stafford brings to the table. I'm rolling with Matthew Stafford in that argument. So that's my take on the quarterback room. And in summation, so takeaways for this, the 49ers, Purdy's good enough. He's good enough to get it done. They could certainly win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. But the question is, will they? If they're down in the fourth quarter of an NFC championship game or a Super Bowl, you going to lean on Brock Purdy, or are you going to hope his supporting cast steps up for him? In Seattle, Sam Darnold, certainly a good enough quarterback to win a bunch of games for you. But when is Jalen Milroe time? I think it's eventually going to be Jalen Milroe time. And, Sam Darnold probably doesn't want to hear that, and it could be a couple years. For now, it's Sam Darnold, but, we saw the Rams take care of him in the playoffs, and it wasn't pretty. And not all on Sam Darnold, for sure. Their offensive line was a little bit leaky there against the Rams, or is the Rams' defensive front that good? But I have a feeling Seattle, to get to the promised land, they may have to wait till Milroe time. And then Arizona, can Kyler Murray elevate his game? We've been waiting for years to step it up, especially in the second half of the season. I mean, he's a fun, entertaining, scary quarterback, but when push comes to shove, he's just not in that group of top quarterbacks in the league that you want on your side in crunch time. And then the Rams, they just have two proven commodities. Matthew Stafford, maybe occasionally, especially early in the season, makes bonehead plays. We've seen him throw just really ill-timed interceptions, games that we should win, and for whatever reason, he doesn't step up his game and throws a critical interception at a bad time. But overall, I don't think there's a single Ram fan that wants a change at the quarterback position anytime soon, because he is the guy, and we love him, and we've seen what he can do, and the attitude he brings into the locker room and in those pregame huddles, it's a sight to behold. And Jimmy G, a proven commodity as well, the best backup quarterback in the division right now, and a guy that's won a bunch of football games. A lot of experience in this Rams quarterback room. So quarterbacks, I give the edge to the Rams. And when you get to the starters, pick your poison, or pick your, the traits that you like for your quarterback. Sam Darnold, highs and lows. Brock Purdy, pretty steady, but not so great in crunch time or when he's behind. And Kyler Murray, super exciting, and no real limits to what he can do. We just haven't seen it when it matters enough. That's my roundup on the NFC West quarterback groups, and we will get to another position group here in a few days. We're going to continue next episode our tour around our parsing of the Rams 2025 schedule. We'll be talking about the Rams versus the Eagles and the Rams versus the Lions.